brain fog and fatigue. So maybe that's a real syndrome. Maybe it's just Thursday. It's not clear this is even real. At least one study shows that most people who told physicians they had long COVID never even had COVID at all. One German study revealed that these patients' brains showed no changes. So Alex Berenson has been following all of this stuff and a lot of stories that no one else is following. He's the author of the best-selling book, Pandemia. He joins us now to assess. Alex Berenson, thanks so much for coming on. Look, I don't want to make fun of people suffering or their illnesses or their symptoms, which are probably real. But at some point, if this is going to qualify as a federal disability, we have a right to know whether it's a thing or not, is it?
Yes, it's a great question. Before I talk long COVID, I have to say one thing to you, which is I seem to say it every time I come on, Tucker, but thank you. We were on the week the book came out, and it's really because of you and Laura that it's a bestseller. Pandemia did not get reviews anywhere. It essentially went under a media blackout, but you talked about it a little bit, and it was a bestseller everywhere but the New York Times, which wouldn't, allow it on the list. So thank you for that. I really mean
Your
that.
former employer. Hilarious.
My former employer, right. They would not, drop water on me if I were on fire at this point. But you know what? So be it. I'm telling the truth, and whether they like it or not, that's the way it is. Long COVID. Okay. Long COVID is a joke, unfortunately, medically. It is, and you're right. At the same time, we have to be aware that these people are really suffering. Okay,
right.
It is a lot like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or these other sort of ill-defined disorders that have kind of taken over medicine or taken over parts of medicine in the last 30 years. There are people that it's especially sort of middle-aged women. There's a certain kind of person who fits this profile who is suffering from insomnia, fatigue, pain, depression, and they work pretty hard to medicalize their conditions. Men have their own ways of dealing with this. For men, it's often back pain. It can be alcohol abuse. A lot of Americans these days are under a lot of stress, okay? And COVID made that worse. But that does not mean that this is a real medical condition. There's really no evidence that, that a virus, again, let me put it to you this way. If you are really sick with COVID, if you get stuck on a ventilator, if you get hospitalized, if you need oxygen support, you're going to have a recovery period. And that recovery period can be significant. But that's not what these people want to talk about. They want to talk about people who had very few or no symptoms, who were never hospitalized, and who in many cases never actually had a positive COVID diagnosis, and to claim that some period of time later, they became sick with long COVID and they're entitled to essentially welfare for the rest of their lives. And if we're going to do that, we need some evidence that this is an actual illness with an actual biological course. And we do not have that at all. I write about this in Pandemia, but actually more evidence has developed in just the last couple of months that suggests this really is not, it's not a biological illness, which again, doesn't mean these folks aren't suffering with something.
I get it. So the plan has always been to just send every American a check every month because that's what they want to do. Wouldn't it just be more straightforward to do that? Guaranteed basic income?
I think that's right. If that's what we want, then that's what we should do. But to make people pretend they're sick actually worsens their conditions a lot of the time. And I'll never forget in 2008 talking to a rheumatologist about fibromyalgia, and he was very sincerely worried about these people he was treating. But he said, they don't have an illness. And the more they hang around the medical system, the worse their problems become. And that's the risk. It's not just that you're treating them with drugs they don't need, which can be very powerful. It's that they get to think of themselves as sick. And then it becomes harder and harder for them to make the transition back to being healthy.
That's right. And it's just so dishonest. It's like medical marijuana. If you want to legalize weed, do it. But don't pretend indica is chemotherapy. It's so insulting.
That's right.
I think. Alex Berenson, it's great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.